we are very lucky to have back with us live in the studios this morning, Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern is a 27-year veteran with the CIA, serving as an analyst from 1963 to 1990. He was Robert Gates' branch chief in the early 70s. From 1981 to 85, he was an intelligence briefer for President Reagan, where he was in charge of preparing daily security briefs for the president, vice president, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Advisor, and the cabinet. He was also one of several CIA analysts who prepared the president's daily brief during the first Bush administration. He is co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity and leads Speaking Truth to Power, a section of Tell the Word, an expression of the Ecumenical Church of the Savior in inner city Washington, D.C. Ray, thank you very much for coming back in and spending time with us again this morning. So last time we spoke with you was just about a month ago. We have since seen in the media more evidence coming out from Edward Snowden that the U.S. has been involved with spying on European leaders, including, for instance, Chancellor Angela Merkel, since at least 2003. What's your take on the significance of this latest development?
The spying on foreign leaders comes as little surprise. The extent of it and the incoherence of it, what I say, does surprise me. There doesn't seem to be any adult supervision left. The technology is driving this. If you can, if you can intercept or guide or eavesdrop on Angela Merkel's telephone, well, why not do it? Nobody seems to be in place to say, well, does this make good sense? Apparently, they did it for over a decade, and NSA admits in its own documents that, aside from having information into what she eats with a Zalabat on Sunday afternoon, they didn't get anything worth any intelligence value. So why did they keep it up? Because they could, and because nobody told them, hey, there's a cost-benefit calculation you need to make here. If they find out about it, they never find out about this. So again, no adults in charge. The spying on foreign people is something that intelligence services do. None of them do it on this scale or with this capability. So there is a difference in kind here, not just degree. I'm the last, as an intelligence officer, to say that you can't get really lucrative information from this source. Now, it's often not determinative, but I can tell you that from my own experience, when Ronald Reagan said, we're going to conclude arms control agreements with the Soviet Union, but it's going to be trust but verify. Well, we were the verify, okay? In other words, we could go to the president and say, Mr. President, if the Soviets cheat on this, we promise you, we guarantee that we'll let you know within a week. We're that good. We could do that. Now, a lot of that had to do with overhead imagery, of course, but a lot of it also could be ascribed to this very sensitive intercept capability. So is it a necessary part of intelligence gathering? Yeah, sure it is. Should it be done with some sense of proportion? You don't have, you could go back to the old Greeks. Over the Temple of Delphi was Maiden Agon, Greek for nothing in excess, okay? Romans in medio res, virtues in the middle. Too much of it is no good, too little is no good. You be sensible, you be proportional. And that's what's gone out the window here with this cable. Sweep up everything, get everything about everybody. We'll store it in this great big haystack, and then we'll develop fancy, really imaginative ways to retrieve what we need. Well, hello, Think about that for a second. The Boston fellows up there that during the Boston Marathon, the Russians had warned us about them twice. About them twice. Okay, be careful, these guys. These guys are really bad guys. What happened? Well, the FBI didn't pick up on it, and they didn't tell the Boston police. And actually, the FBI was very busy in Boston. You know what they were doing? They were down on the Commons monitoring Occupy and the Catholic workers. All these other very suspicious folks. Give me a break. That's what they were doing, Now, what does that tell you? Could these eavesdropping techniques, this very intrusive eavesdropping, could they have prevented the Boston Marathon bombing? Not a chance. I mean, it's sort of like, whatever you say about J. Edgar Hoover, and I say a lot of bad things about him, at least he had that very imaginative fingerprint discovery, okay? So fingerprints were great after the robbery, right? The robber leaves a little fingerprint on the teller window, and you got him if he's in the bank, right? Did it help to prevent bank robberies? I don't think so. Maybe the rare instance. Well, that's the way it is with collecting all this stuff on what everybody puts in their email, what puts in there. It's not gonna stop terrorism. It might help find a terrorist after the fact, although they haven't even used it that way very, very successfully. So it doesn't work. Now, I have to say that when General Alexander, who is a we don't say in Washington D.C. at least, we don't say liar. We say he's an untruthful person or a prevaricator, or he takes liberties with the truth. Well, this is not the first time he did so, but when he claimed that there were 54 terrorist events, that this eavesdropping, this vacuum cleaner approach to conversations and email, that 54 times this helped thwart terrorist attacks. Even the press, even the very docile press, picked out the ones that they featured. Eavesdropping played no role here, or a very marginal role. So when he got before Pat Leahy's committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, Leahy says, "Well, now, General Alexander, how many of those 54 had to do with something that was about to happen in America?" He says, "Well, 13. And then Leahy said, "Well, how many were actually thwarted?" 1. And Clapper, another prevaricator, the head of national intelligence, chimes in with, "No, I think maybe 2. God, as if 2 out of 54 is better than 1 out of 54. And you know what that one was? Some Somali taxi driver in L.A. sending $8,000 back to Al-Shabaab, or whatever they call that terrorist place. And give me a break. So these guys can't even come up with, and you can bet they're searching all their files and have the FBI say. So, it's deceitful. It's a hoax on the American public to think that all this money sunk into these things is helpful in preventing terrorist attacks. Rather, it diverts attention away from the tried and trusted ways: detective work, intelligence work, police work, which would have worked. Which would have worked. Part of that is to pay attention to reliable liaison services. And why would the Russians go telling us that these guys were really bad news? What reason would they have to deceive us about that? Now, a lot of the liaison services are not going to cooperate with us to the extent they have before, because they know that their leaders are being spied upon. They're probably being called on the carpet now to say, how much did you know about this? Yeah, how deeply are you complicit in this? I think this is so important that I probably just adduce 1 or 2 more examples of how diversion from the normal painstaking intelligence work, that's what it really is, almost caused terrorist events to happen. There's a fellow named Abdul Muttalib. He was a Nigerian, well-heeled Nigerian, son of his father works at the World Bank, okay? Not one of these long-haired guys hiding in the mountains of Waziristan. So he gets radicalized, mostly because of what the Israelis did in Gaza and what we helped them do in Gaza. One of the times when the Israelis killed 1,400 Palestinians as opposed to 14 Israelis dead. So he goes off the deep end, and his father notices that, and his father goes to the U.S. Embassy, and he says, "My son, I don't know how to say this, I don't want to rat on my son, but he's gone crazy, and he's gone to Yemen now, and I don't know what he's going to do, so keep track of him, for God's sake." The father says to the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria. What happens? Next thing you know, he's over Detroit in a plane with 200 other people with a little bomb in his underwear. What prevented it? So very courageous co-passengers, sat on the bomb. Good, So did this eavesdropping thing help then? No way did it help. What about the Times Square bomber? Pakistani. Goes back to his village in the northwest frontier where they're doing all the drone strikes. finds out that a lot of his friends are decimated, comes back, guess what? Radicalized, you know. Now, the smart people say, well, he was self-radicalized. Well, hello, you know, he was radicalized by what happened to his family and his friends. So he comes back and he's going to blow up Times Square. Now, you should keep track of people that go to Pakistan and go up into that area, whether they're benign or, you know, malignant. You know, you keep track of them. They didn't do that either. So there's a whole series of these things that we escaped just barely. In the Times Square thing, it was a street vendor that said something funny about this car. You know, that's how they stopped that. So all this attention to these eavesdropping techniques are not effective. Now, worse than that, Mike, and this is my major beef. You know, as an Army officer, I was thinking back to this 50 years ago now, when I was commissioned, I took a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that oath seriously. We all did in those days. I found out recently that there's no expiration on that date, no expiration date on that oath. I asked a lawyer, actually. So what does that mean? Well, the Fourth Amendment says, see if I can recite it, the right of the people to be protected from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause. Probable cause, including defining the particulars of the place to be searched and the person or thing to be seized, end quote. Now, okay, so nothing's going to happen without a court warrant that is based on probable cause, okay? Now, you don't look like a terrorist to me, but this means that you're a suspected terrorist because your stuff is being picked up just like mine, Mike, okay? Now, how about probable cause, including defining the particulars of the place to be seized and the property or the person to be searched? Well, there's no particulars here. These FISA courts, 9 judges or so, have been co-opted. They're complicit, just as the heads of the intelligence committees. I've never seen the like of it. You've got all three branches of our government complicit in gross violations of the Fourth Amendment. Now, I'm not going to mention the Fifth Amendment, you know, drone strikes against U.S. citizens, hello, or the First Amendment, you know, what's happening there. But the Fourth is where this one comes in. And, you know, this is an exaggeration, but I would say that I don't care much about what we do in terms of getting foreign intelligence, the NSA and CIA, on world leaders. You know, my beef there is, you know, let's be adult about it. You know, just because we have the capabilities doesn't mean we do everything. But I do have a real beef about the Constitution, and so did Ed Snowden, okay? Now, people say to me, you saw Ed Snowden a month ago. What makes a guy who's got a 6-figure salary, beautiful girlfriend, lives in Honolulu, cushy job, which doesn't take much intellectual stim for him, you know, bright as he is, what makes a guy give up everything and risk his own life? Do what he did. The answer is simple. The Fourth Amendment to our Constitution. He said so as soon as he got into Hong Kong. He said, you know, I watched this, what he called turnkey tyranny, you know. In other words, you get everything all set up with lists of people who might be, well, Mike, you might be on a list, Mike, I think I am, you know. And once martial law is declared, or they can even do it absent martial law now with the National Defense Authorization Act, you turn the key and you've got something approximating what happened in 1933 and subsequent years in Germany. So he said, look, you know, I watched all this. I complained to my colleagues. They didn't seem to give a rat's patootie about any of this. And so I started to examine my own conscience, and I realized not only is this really endangering our country and its citizens, it's not the kind of atmosphere I want to live in where there's no privacy, but I'm part of it. Without my expertise and the expertise of technical people like me, they couldn't do it. Now, wow, you know, what do you decide to do then? Well, most people say, well, heck, who am I? I'm one person. How can I? And I know I can't go through channels because I know what happened to Tom Drake from NSA. I know what happened to Bradley or Chelsea Manning from. So what did he do? Well, this guy has the common sense to figure out how he can reveal this so American citizens can know what's being done to them. And so he figures out, well, how could I get to a safe place? And how do I get this material delivered? It took him months to persuade Glenn Greenwald to succumb to an encryption system. I mean, you can't do this stuff, for obvious reasons, without an encryption system, okay? Well, then it worked. And Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald met him in Hong Kong because the bona fides he had already established by showing them some of this stuff, okay? So, why did he go to Hong Kong? People say, oh, some people are even saying, he's a Chinese agent, give me a break, He went to Hong Kong because it had no extradition treaty with the United States, and he couldn't go anywhere else without being, NSA guys are flagged. You can't get on a plane and go to Quito or go to a place in Latin America. He was a stop from Honolulu. So that was a direct flight. He got off, and that's as far as he planned. This is the interesting thing. He had this stuff, not in his 4 laptops. That was, people who know this, know that you don't store a lot of stuff on laptops. A lot of stuff these days, but you use other ways, other media, and that's how he did it. He told us that when we were together. But he'd get it all out, and he gave it to Poitras and to Glenn Greenwald. And then what? Well, Poitras and Greenwald are not social workers. They got out of Dodge and went home, wrote their stories, right? So this Snowden, this is pretty town, Hong Kong, but CIA station's right down the road. How long is it? He hadn't even thought beyond that. So it was really true what he said. I expect them to get me, but not until after I've done this. And what I need to do is get it done. Not like people who couldn't get it done because they try to go through channels, but I'm going to do it. So what happens? WikiLeaks to the rescue. WikiLeaks? I thought they were holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Well, Julian Assange is. It's amazingly enterprise, actually. Sarah Harrison, one of Julian Assange's lieutenants, happened to be in Australia. And she was suggested that she go to Hong Kong and help Edward Snowden out. And she arrived just in the nick of time because they were breathing heavily down on his back, the Chinese authorities. I don't know if the CIA had found out where he was yet. So she went to the Russian consulate, I think, this I hear from the newspapers, and got a ticket via, the only way he could go via Moscow and then on to Havana and then down into where they've offered him asylum. Well, she gets him out. She extricates him from this incredibly parlous situation. The Chinese premier was meeting with our president at the time, So there was, the president could have easily said, hey, get those Hong Kong guys to, get savvy here. We need this guy back, see? Instead of that, they take his passport away, okay, while he's on way to Cuba via Moscow. And so it's John Kerry who gets up and says in his imperious manner, you must surrender Mr. Snowden to us, Mr. Putin. I know there's no extradition treaty between the United States and Russia, but you must. We have these charges against him. You must. And, I know a little bit about the Russians, and I think I know a little bit about Putin. I can see him sitting around at the table looking at his advisor saying, who is this guy? Who is this guy, Kerry? He says, I must all that stuff. When international law requires me to do just the opposite, okay, give me a break. Now, seizing the high road, Putin comes off as somebody who obeys international law. Kerry, I won't say more about him, but that was part of it. The whole attitude, this imperious thing, you have to do this, even though we have no law that requires you to do it. And so, long story short here, because he has no passport, because Kerry has made him stateless. It's big, stateless. He spent the next 5 weeks in Sheremetyevo airport there in Moscow, trying to figure a way around or through through Russia, and finally had an appeal for asylum. Now, Putin granted him that asylum, and I guess the supreme irony is that although Ed Snowden never in his wildest dreams expected to end up in Russia, it's the safest place for him. It's by far the safest place for him on the face of the globe. Why? Well, we met with him on the 9th of October. On the 3rd of October, there was a big establishment meeting in Washington, kind of thing run by the Washington Post. It was on cyber warfare, So the dignitaries were there, including General Michael Hayden, who was head of the NSA and the CIA, and Mike Rogers, who's head of the House Intelligence Committee. So the discussion turns to Snowden, and somebody mentions, he's on the list to get the Sakharov Prize there in Western Europe. They're going to give him a prize for defending civil liberties. And Hayden says, before the assembled, so I know list. He's on the list for a prize. I know what list. I know what I'd recommend, what list he'd be on. Mike Rogers, head of the Intelligence Committee, immediately chimes in saying, yeah, I can help you on that. Now, bear in mind, this was not a meeting of the mafia, okay? These were the well-heeled folks of Washington under the auspices of the Washington Post. And the previous director of the CIA and NSA is suggesting that Ed Snowden be put on this list for assassination, which our president approves every Tuesday morning before he goes in to have a nice lunch with Michelle, okay? That's bizarre, but that happens, okay? And worse still, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, this is not a former, this is the guy, actually, he turns out to be a failed FBI agent, having had to leave the FBI before he was even vested. And when that happens, you can be sure something very untoward happened that the FBI wanted to sort of paper over. Anyhow, Mike Rogers chimes in right away and says, we can help you out on that. So, I said to Ed, as we were talking more informally after he got the award, I said, Ed Snowden, Ed, are you aware that just 6 days ago, the former head of the NSA and CIA said you should be put on the assassination list? And he looked at me and he kind of said, well, Ray, I do keep up on those things very closely. Yeah, I know that. And he shrugged his shoulders as if to say, my God, what we come to. A little footnote on that. Even though this meeting was run by the Washington Post, have you read about it anywhere? And now the Post forgot to report on it, and so did everyone else. Almost everyone else. If you don't know where to look on the internet, you missed it, okay? But just to finish up this little segment here, Snowden is smiling broadly at the irony that he happens to be in a safe place now where no drone warrior is going to push a console button and zap him in Russia, even if they find out where he is. And nobody's going to send in SEAL Team 6 to shoot him in the head a couple of times like they did to Osama bin Laden. So I think this time, he has a whole year there now, 7 months left, I guess, or 8. So things can change in a year. And, I remember Daniel Ellsberg, when he first released the Pentagon Papers, he was given every adjective that Snowden has been given, and then some. Now we know that he turned out to be a hero and helped shorten a disastrous war. And everybody thinks Daniel Ellsberg is a hero. Some of them say, but Snowden's revealed a lot worse stuff. And Dan chuckles. He said, "There's a worse. What's worse than a fabricated war? What's worse than a war based on deceit and other things?" So that's the deal on Snowden and the bizarre stuff that's going on in Washington, wanting to put him on an assassination list.
So it begs the question of who is driving the bus if Obama says he didn't know about Merkel's phones being tapped or the European leaders. You were at the CIA for close to 3 decades. Were all the previous directors there and or at the NSA as aggressive as they are currently?
Well, they weren't, actually. They took the law pretty seriously. And particularly after the law forbade them expressly from doing the kinds of things that Hayden acquiesced in when Dick Cheney said, I really should make sure that your listeners know that this is before 9/11, okay? You hear always, after 9/11, everything changed. This was before 9/11. 9/11 was September, right? This is February. Dick Cheney goes to Michael Hayden, the head of the NSA, and he says, General Hayden, I've heard about that first commandment you have up there in NSA, thou shalt not eavesdrop on Americans without a court warrant. Well, forget about it. Forget about it. We're going to go into AT&T, Verizon out there in San Francisco. We're going to get a backdoor into our American telephone calls, and so don't be too concerned. Now, don't spread this around. I mean, don't make a employee bulletin about the first commandment: don't eavesdrop on Americans without a court warrant. That no longer obtains. Just get together a small coterie of folks who would be willing to be. He didn't say accomplices, I guess, but that's what he meant. And General Hayden saluted, and that's what happened. To their credit, one major telecom, Quest, refused to cooperate. They said, no, this violates the Fourth Amendment, which it clearly does and did. And their CEO ended up in prison on some charges about securities fraud or something. I don't know the value of the charges, but I have to tell you that it wasn't everybody that cooperated here. Quest would not cooperate. And this, again, is before 9/11. So when Michael Hayden decided to do this, and it came out that he was doing this, this is equally interesting when you talk about the media. James Risen found out that this was going on. And he found out that about 3 months before the election in November 2004.
James Risen at New York Times.
Right. He's a correspondent or journalist with the New York Times. He's also a Pulitzer Prize winner and writes books as well. What he found out was that this eavesdropping was occurring without the necessary court warrant. I quoted the Fourth Amendment to you. And he said, well, wow, this is really a story. And so he wrote it all up and gave it to his supervisors, editors there at the New York Times. And they said, oh my. Oh, well, it's before the election. So we don't want to publish anything so explosive before the election. That's 3 or 4 months, months before November, that Americans were being spied on, just like Nixon spied on us, okay? That was one of the counts in the indictment that came out of the House Judiciary Committee for impeachment of Nixon. So it's clearly an impeachable offense to us. But no. So the New York Times went to the White House and said, we have this story. And the White House said, no, it's national security. You can't do terrorism, 9/11, terrorism. And Sulzberger says, oh, okay. They held that story until December of the following year, pretty much assuring George Bush's return to office. And what happened in December of 2005 was Sulzberger was told, hey, Risen's book is in galley. Okay, Risen is coming out with this book, and it's going to look really odd if one of our journalists, one of our prize Pulitzer-winning journalists, if we don't carry a story on that. So Sulzberger gets in touch with Bush, George W. Bush. And he said, I'm sorry, we have to publish this story. Bush takes him into the Oval Office, okay, with the head of the Washington Bureau, and says, you may not. This is national security. You cannot. And finally, Sulzberger says, we're supposed to be all the news that's fit to print, and we waited 15 months already, for God's sake. Give us a break. And so that was the 5th of December, okay, 2005. Now, why do I mention the 5th of December? Well, because the article was published on the 16th of December in the New York Times, the big one about, the big explosive thing. But on the 6th of December, in other words, one day after the Sulzberger-Bush meeting there in the White House, Rush Holt, congressman from New Jersey, goes on one of these parish calls to General Alexander out at the National Security Agency, okay? Parish calls. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee, right? And his purview includes NSA, and he's heard these weird rumors that that NSA has trashed that First Amendment about not spying on Americans without a court warrant. And so Alexander welcomes Rush Holt, pretty much his supervisor, his oversight person in the Congress, okay? And the first thing Holt says, now, I hear rumors that you're spying on Americans without a court warrant. Is that true, General Alexander? Oh, no! Perish the thought. We never do. We would never do that. No. Categoric no. Okay. So Rush Holt is sort of reassured. And then Rush Holt, so that's December 6th, 10 days later, he reads the New York Times. And he goes bonkers. He calls up the head of he calls up Pete Hoekstra, who was the head of the Intelligence Committee. This guy lied to me to my face, okay? We got to do something about that. Hoekstra said, no, wait. So it's that bad. And it all was because somebody in the White House wasn't told to tell Alexander the cat's out of the bag. Sulzberger's going to publish the story in the New York Times. That was the 5th of December. On the 6th, Rush Holt had this experience with General. By the way, Rush said, to his credit, this guy is never going to get a fourth star if I'm around. Well, it took 5 more years, but then he got a 4th star, and then he got another command. So he ends up being not only head of NSA, but head of the Cyber Command at the Pentagon. He's probably, he's not probably, he is one of the most important and influential and powerful men in our government. Why do I mention all this? Well, Alexander is not to be trusted. Yeah, he's the same fellow I talked about, the 54 terrorists that they thwarted, So he doesn't tell the truth a lot of times, okay? He didn't tell the truth to Rush Holt, and that's a felony because Rush Holt's a member of Congress. He reports to Congress under the Oversight Committee provisions, so that's a felony, lying to Congress, okay? James Clapper. Now, he's a former Air Force general. He's head of national intelligence now. There's a superstructure now over all the others built after 9/11 because Congress likes to rearrange the deck chairs and add levels, okay? So James Clapper is asked in March by Senator Wyden of Oregon, Mr. Clapper, does the National Security Agency collect any kind of information at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? Clapper, no, sir. And Wyden says, are you sure? And Clapper says, well, not wittingly. Now, Clapper had been alerted to the fact that Wyden was going to ask him that question. He lied anyway. And a couple of months later, because of the revelations of Ed Snowden, it comes out that he did lie. He goes back to Congress. He says, I'm really sorry. He apologizes. Apologized because what I said was, quote, clearly erroneous, end quote. And then Andrea Mitchell sort of tries to let him down easy on the Sunday program and says, oh, why'd you do that? He said, I don't know. It became of me. I decided I had to tell the least false thing or the least untruthful thing. I think he said, well, hello, that guy is still head of national intelligence. So what does that say? It says a lot of things. What bothers me most is what it says about the president. I think he's afraid of these guys. I think it's clear he's afraid of them. And, if he was going to be afraid of the military officers like Hayden and Alexander or Clapper, if he was going to be afraid of the CIA to the point where he would not prosecute, clear torturers, both Obama and Attorney General Holder have said that waterboarding is torture. Torture happened. We know who did it. But the president prefers to look to the future rather than look to the past. I tried that on the 5. I got stopped for speeding. I said, look, let's just look to the future now. You know, I know I was speeding, but, you know, I don't want to worry about it. Guess where I got it with the California police, you know? Anyhow, so what we have is a situation where the military creme de la creme, or my Irish grandmother would call them the upper crust, okay, the upper crust. And do you know, Michael, what the upper crust is, the definition of the upper crust? You don't?
No.
All right. Well, I was going out to my first job caddying on a golf course at a very, very exclusive golf course in Long Island. And she said, Raymond, do you know what the upper crust is? Because I used to work with them and you need to know. I said, I know, Grandma. She said, sit you down, Raymond. You don't know. Here's what they are. The upper crust is a bunch of crumbs held together by a lot of dough. No. Now, you know, when you look at the top military and how they become general officers or admirals, the system itself bespeaks favoritism for people who don't make any waves, people who will always salute, people who think the same way the current generals think. And I'd like to say a word about that because I've been thinking about this for a while. During Vietnam, General Westmoreland, General Abrams, who was his deputy, they didn't really acquit themselves as honorable gentlemen. They lied, and a court of law shows that they lied, particularly about how many enemies they were facing. I remember there was a cable we received. The date was 20 August 1967, not even halfway through the war. General Abrams, General Westmoreland was out of town. The issue was whether our analysis, my friend Sam Adams, and everybody in Washington, whether they were right in thinking that there were between 500 and 600,000 Vietnamese under arms in the South, or whether Westmoreland was right in saying, no, there's only 299,000. Okay. I mean, the figure itself sort of bespeaks a little, you buy a camera for $59.95, right, or something like that. Okay, so what happens? We get this cable in, and Abrams says, we can't possibly go with the higher figures. And this is a direct quote. Because we have been projecting an image of success in this war. And there's no way we could, with all caveats and explanations, there is no way that we could prevent the media from drawing a false and erroneous and gloomy conclusion, period, end quote. When I heard about that cable, I asked my friend Sam Adams, he put that in black and white? And the answer was yes. It occurred to me that that should be given to the New York Times. I knew Sam Adams wouldn't do it, and I didn't have the guts to do it. It's one reason I feel so strongly about people who have that guts, namely Ed Snowden most recently. So anyhow, that was the kind of corruption that existed then. As a matter of fact, George Ball, who was Deputy Secretary of State during this period of time, described the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a sewer of deceit. Now let's fast forward a little bit. We've got 9/11, and General Dick Myers comes in, Air Force General, 4-star, and he's going to do the job for Rumsfeld and for Bush. Okay. Now Bush started the torture with an official executive order. The date was February 7, 2002, and it said, we will not abide by the Geneva Conventions, pure and simple. We will treat prisoners, what was the word, carefully, to the extent it's possible, agreeing with the Geneva Conventions, but the sense of it was Geneva is quaint and it's obsolete. We'll do what we want with the Taliban and with Al-Qaeda. That was what a lot of people cited in the early stages as authorizing this kind of thing. So I had a chance to ask General Myers about this. I'm a member of the Harvard Business School alumni, and he came to push his book before a little group of us in Washington. And I said, General Myers, you are on the receiving end of that memorandum which authorized the torture. What member authorized? The one that said that the Geneva Conventions didn't apply. Oh, well, I felt really strongly about that. I think the Geneva. I said, what'd you do about that memo? You got it with everybody else. Well, his answer boiled down to, what's a poor chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to do if the president and Dick Cheney want to authorize torture? So that's Dick Myers, the kind of people you got in under Rumsfeld, except for one, and this is an interesting one, Peter Pace. You remember Peter Pace, the ramrod Marine 4-star general?
A little bit.
Yeah. He was the real deal, you know. He came up for the same kind of training I did about interrogations and all that kind of stuff. And because he was a by-the-book guy, he was never told that after Abu Ghraib, okay, we're talking April 2004, Abu Ghraib, May 2005, General Taguba, he was a 1-star general at the time, he completed the only honest investigation of Abu Ghraib. There were 17 more that Rumsfeld commissioned. But Taguba said, you've heard about these rotten apples, you know, at the bottom of the barrel? I'll tell you how they got rotten. It seeped down from the drip from the very top. Now, that's not his prose, but that's exactly what he found out. And he had the guts to issue those findings. Okay, so that's the next month. That's May. Now, June, a Frago comes out. Frago 245. I'm sorry, 242. Now, what's a Frago? That's a fragmentary order, okay? And who brings it out? But General David Petraeus. And who told him to do it? Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld. And what did it say? Torture. Try to discourage our troops from doing it. But if the Iraqis want to do it, anybody else doing it, no problem. You might want to think about reporting it to the superior officer of the Iraqis or someone else, but you don't have to do that. Forget about it. Now, parenthetically, that's what initially set Bradley Manning off. He saw it. He saw these young people, 22 years of age, his age, getting wrapped up for writing a term paper critical of the Maliki government, being put in these prisons where he knew they'd be tortured, okay? That's before he ever saw the video about the collateral murder, you know, these people, okay? So that's June of 2004. So what was happening in Iraq and these prisoners? The U.S. knew about it, and the instructions were, forget about it. You might want to report it to the Iraqi commander, right, you know, but forget about it. Now, guess who didn't know about that? Well, let me fast forward. Was it June 2004? December 2005. Don Rumsfeld and Peter Pace are having a joint conference at the Pentagon. It had just been reported the previous week that this incredible torture was happening in these Iraqi prisons. And so one of the journalists, a woman, said, now, General Pace, what are your instructions to American officers and soldiers if they see torture? He didn't blink. He said, my instructions are what they always have been. Stop it on the spot. Rumsfeld. Oh, General Pace, I think you mean they should report it, not to stop it. No, sir. No. They're to stop it on the spot. Watching this, I'm saying, whoa, this is the first time in my life I've ever seen the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff so sure of himself that he'd contradict the Secretary of Defense. How could he do that? Because he didn't know. He didn't know about Frago 242. And, of course, he didn't get his tenure didn't get renewed, as they always are. You usually get 2 4-year terms as Joint Chief. Now, he was let go. So that was the kind of atmosphere that Rumsfeld, with Myers and with Pace, and even today, I mean, General Hayden, the guy who Dick Cheney went and really started this whole NSA stuff. He was the head of NSA, and he knew what his duty was. As a matter of, well, let me just, when this all became big news, there were a lot of questions as to how he had conducted himself. And all of a sudden, he switched out of NSA, and he's given the job of Deputy National Intelligence Director, the superstructure job. And then all of a sudden, it becomes clear what had happened as a result of the Risen book and other revelations about torture and so forth. And so they want to put this very malleable guy, Hayden, well-spoken, tough appearance, they want to put him in as head of the CIA. So, as these revelations come out, previous NSA directors, I wonder what's going on here in NSA. They know what the First Commandment was. Who reversed the First Commandment? So when Hayden was clearly implicated in all this, and you could tell it from the Risen disclosures there at the end of December 2000, and we're talking 2005 now, right? Yeah. Okay. One of his predecessors as head of NSA, General Bill Odom, real straight arrow, Army officer, 4-star, expert on the Soviet Union. He was straight arrow, okay? And when he heard about what happened, he told an interviewer, General Hayden should be court-martialed. He should be court-martialed for disobeying his oath to the Constitution. He knows about the Fourth Amendment. He knows about the First Commandment out there. He should be court-martialed, okay? He was livid. Now, fast forward to May of 2006. This is an interesting story. I had that little debate with Rumsfeld down at Atlanta on the 4th of May. And so, what's his name? Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs wanted to interview me, but we couldn't do it until, I think it was the 17th of May. So I'm up there in the blue room there waiting for Dobbs to give me the nod. And in rushes Bobby Ray Inman, anointed priest of the intelligence military hierarchy. Everybody popular on both sides of the aisle, He's teaching at the University of Texas now, but he was head of NSA when the FISA law was written. He wrote most of it himself. FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It was the one that said, thou shalt not eavesdrop on Americans without a court warrant, okay? And so he's speaking at the New York Public Library on, it was the 8th of May. And I learned that what he said was, hey, what General Hayden did was clearly against the law. It was well beyond what was permitted in FISA. As a matter of fact, I was responsible for writing into that law, you shall not do anything else that is not expressly authorized by this law. Says Bobby Ray Inman. This is at a public meeting, New York Public Library, on the 8th of May, 2006. And I'm saying, wow, this is great. How did I learn about it? Steve Clements has a blog, the Washington Note. He was there. Who else was there? James Risen. Okay. And there were a couple of other dignitaries there, but no reporting. Okay. But I know about it because I read the So when we fast forward now from the 8th until the 17th of May, and who rushes into the room, the blue room, while I'm waiting to go in with Lou Dobbs, but Bobby Ray Inman. And he doesn't even have the tie on. And they don't get me a tie. And very deferential to him. Oh, yeah, we get a tie. And he goes in. He steals about 5 minutes of my time. Well, that wasn't so bad. But I'm thinking, oh, man, this is great. This is poetic justice. I know what he just said there at the New York Public Library just a couple of days ago. Oh, this is great, because Hayden had just been nominated to become CIA director. And Lou Dobbs wanted to ask him, what the establishment thinks of this. So I'm watching the tube there, and Dobbs says, well, what do you think of General Hayden as head of the CIA? And Bobby Ray McGovern says, couldn't pick a better guy. Just terrific, highly qualified. I know him personally. Couldn't pick a better guy. The nomination was the confirmation proceedings went the next day on the 18th of May. Okay, so clearly they were afraid that somebody would cite what Bobby Ray McGovern had said on the 8th of May, and so now he's making it good by. So when he came out of the room, he said, "Hey, what just happened here? I know what you said at the public library. What?" He gives his tie up and he makes a quick exit. But what I'm saying here is, even the best of them, okay, and Bobby Ray McGovern is admittedly the best. I know he was good at the NSA. He didn't violate these things. Even the best of them cover up for one another, and they justify one another. And when Hayden, the last thing I'll say about this, and he's the guy, he's the CNN go-to guy now on all this. And it's not as though he's not implicated in the whole thing. But when he was going the next day on the 18th of May, 2006, confirmation hearings, he was given all kinds of softball questions by Republican senators. One was from Blount, I think, from Missouri. And he says, and it was all rehearsed. He says, now, General Hayden, when the president asked you to do what you did with the eavesdropping and so forth, did you hesitate for a moment to obey those instructions? Now, the scripted answer was, of course not, sir. But instead, Hayden stops and he says, well, actually, Senator, I had to think long and hard about that. But in the end, I decided that I could not do it. Next question should have been, well, General Hayden, why did you have to think long and hard about that? Like maybe the Fourth Amendment? But they just didn't ask him that. And it was just such a telling thing. I mean, the guy, he knows a little bit about moral training, and he knows about the First Amendment at NSA, the First Commandment, and he knows about the Fourth Amendment. So he was being unusually candid and saying, well, it wasn't so easy. I mean, when the president asked me to violate the Constitution, I had to stack up whether I swear a solemn oath to the president. And this is really big. This is big. Or I swear a solemn oath to the Constitution. I was on CNN just last week, and I was talking about swearing an oath to the Constitution, and Aaron Burnett said, "No, that's an oath to the government." I said, "No way is that an oath to the government? Oh, to the country? No, not the country. That's what makes this different. We have a piece of paper here. It's a Constitution. People died for this Constitution. The founders of our country who wrote it, who lived near where I live now in Northern Virginia, well, when they said that they would risk their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for this enterprise, it was far more likely that they would end up, at the end of a rope than they would as hallowed founders of our country. And so the least we can do now is to get out there and defend these things that they fought for. Fourth Amendment, the British were really intrusive in the way they come into your home and take your personal effects. And, there were no telephones then. But the Fourth Amendment was designed specifically against, designed to protect people from unreasonable searches and seizures, because those guys knew what that was like. So for our Congress people, and I have to say Dianne Feinstein in the Senate and Mike Rogers in the House, they're complicit in all this. They are violating their constitutional oath. And for them to call Ed Snowden a traitor, or, call him as somebody who's violated the law or the Constitution, no, it's the other way around. You can't make laws. You can't make laws that violate the Constitution, and that's what they've tried to do. Hitler, I'm not supposed to say Hitler, okay? But Hitler during the 30s did everything by the law. It just so happened that the laws violated what existed then in a German constitution, which was very much patterned after ours. So you can obey all these newfangled laws like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, but if they're unconstitutional, which they will be proven to be eventually, then, not only should you not obey them, you should get out in the streets and make sure that nobody else obeys them either.
We are talking with Ray McGovern. He is a 27-year veteran of the CIA and co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And you have a website that people can get more of your work at?
Yes, Mike. It's real easy. RayMcGovern.com, all one word.
All right. And you're also it's sold out, but you are the keynote speaker at today's 5th anniversary celebration of Coffee Strong that's happening at the Daybreak Star Indian Cultural Center here in Seattle.
Yeah, I felt so honored to be asked to do that. I mean, these people are doing the work, tending and trying to pick up the pieces of lives that have been shattered by these wars based on, we don't say lies, based on deception and based on other means than they advertise them as. So, just being here near Lewis McCord and just knowing all the tragedy that's happened here, it's really terrific to have a group like Coffee Strong doing what they can to help GIs, not only who are from the battle, but before the battle.
All right. And even though it's sold out, people can still make donations to Coffee Strong in honor of the 5th anniversary and the work they do at their website, coffeestrong.org. So with that, we are pretty much out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
You're most welcome, Mike.
Again, Ray McGovern, 27-year veteran with the CIA and co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And you can find out more about his work at his website, raymcgovern.com.